Good Thursday, everybody. Income 65/751. Welcome to week boom bam 12. How you doing? I am doing much better. What do we have this week? Menominee, Michigan, right up on the shores of Lake Superior. Beautiful country up there. Spent about a decade or so up in that neck of the woods, upper peninsula, upper Michigan, Superior. Okay. But enough about me, your sufficiently caffeinated communication instructor. Let's get to you. Okay. So for this week, week 12, a short reading this week. We're going to talk about some quantitative research. Okay. And so I don't have anything for you from our textbook. What I do have is a link to an article for you, real short. And then, if you like, I have a bonus reading with a bonus question. Now, as I've said in the past, I'm careful, I'm tentative about giving you anything that I have written. Not because I think there's anything wrong that I've written, but I don't want you to feel like you're obliged to read what I write. And if you don't, want to do anything extra, you don't have to. But I realized last week that over in the, many of you are in bold classes. You're in the 651, excuse me, and then you're over in the 3-1 as well. And I've given a couple of chances for extra credit points over in the 831, but I think, okay, for fairness, for parity, let me give some here too. So I give you this reading with the potential to pick up, I think it's 5 extra credit points if you want to. Now, this article that I posted is an example of how it is that you can get at an issue in a way that is more narrative, more in terms of style, grounded in memoir. That is, you start with a personal experience and you sort of work your way out, but nonetheless is still factually based. So one of the things that I say in the bonus question is, you don't have to do this. This is extra credit, and you can feel free to agree or disagree with the points that I make in the piece. But what I mean by that is, as you should with any author, direct your attention to the evidence that they present and then how it is that they use that evidence. And that's the hook, that's the nub, that's the secret sauce in research and when it comes to public relations, because excuse me, very tasty. You can have a company working for you, or you can be part of a company working for someone else, and they can say, well, we believe that the direction you should go is X, Y, and Z because we read something in this publication and we just have a hunch this is where the trend is going. Okay, what's the research that backs that up? All right. And you should avoid in your own career as strategic communicators simply flying. I'm going to qualify this, but simply constructing a campaign based on what you feel. And you should, by default, think about what kind of data you can lay your hands on. How good is it? And I discussed this in the piece. All right. And then based on how thorough and how good and how rich it is, what kind of conclusions can you draw from it? Is it rich enough? Is it been gathered well enough to rise to the level of external validity? say, well, this thing is true not just for this group that we've studied, but for the entire population represented by this group. All right. One of the ways that you can hook people into paying attention to that process is by a style that's sometimes referred to as memoir, sometimes referred to as narrative. And that's what I'm doing. So I'll give you a little sneak preview. That's what I'm doing in this type of article. I start with a reflection on my own experience as a parent in raising children, as the segue, as the way for the to connect with the reader by way of familiarity. Going, oh yeah, I'm raising kids, or I've got someone who's raising kids, et cetera, et cetera. And then I start rolling out the data. Okay. So when I say I say this in the overview for week 12, you are free to agree or disagree with the position that I take in the piece. And the position that I take has got nothing to do with whether or not children should receive vaccines. Okay. But it's about how the data is processed and how it is presented to parents. And then the questions that processing and that presentation raise by way of informed consent and the capacity to make a good decision. All right. This is one of the difficult things, I think, in living in a democracy. Now, at the federal level, our system is a representative republic, but most of our governance structure and the social structure that parallels that. I mean, the one spawns the other, or it's a chicken and egg kind of thing. But the difficulty is that if we say we believe in the capacity of every individual to have a voice by way of having a vote, we have to believe in the capacity of every individual to understand the information and then to be able to act in their best interest, to know how to act in their best interest. We get in trouble, and put this in your pocket as a strategic communicator. You get in trouble when, without evidence, you assume that the population is not capable, and for whatever reason, they don't pay attention, they're too stupid, they're constantly distracted, there are socioeconomic barriers that they throw up. We run a risk of pulling apart the fabric of society when we start to assume that people are just too stupid to make decisions on their own behalf, and therefore we, as the appointed people, the educated folks, we're going to have to make them for them. Now, look, I'm not naive. I spent a lot of time in data and looking at how public behaves. I'm not naive enough to say, well, the public always pays perfect attention and they're always informed and they always act in their best interest. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm always on guard for, to start as a thinker and then a writer, a communicator, what I'm always on guard against is that presumptive attitude that can rise up and say, well, they can't quite understand this, so we're going to have to do it for them. And there are a lot of industries in the United States in which that type of attitude is prevalent. Okay, so I'm asking the question indirectly in this piece: is the medical field one of those professions that assumes that these people, they just can't make decisions for themselves? We're going to have to make them for them, right? You can agree with me or disagree with me, but what I want you to do in whatever position you take, and by the way, answering the question is not, do you agree with me? That's you'll get to the bonus question, and nowhere in the bonus question is, do you agree with Dr. Gardner? That's immaterial. You don't have to agree or disagree with me. But in answering the question, if you choose to answer it, what I ask you to do is I lay out two, what would you call them? Spheres or areas that, in my assessment, my estimation of the data, create problems for parents trying to become as informed as possible prior to making a decision about what to do with their children or themselves. There are two major areas. One is a data-driven issue, and the other one is a financial institutional issue. And within each of those two areas, I enumerate a number of factors that operate that I am making the case makes it difficult for people to come away with a full picture of risk and benefit when it comes to medical procedures. That's what I mean when I say, if you don't agree with me, say, oh no. If you want to say, yeah, I don't see it that way. I think that there is plenty in the way of information. Okay, that's fine. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, but again, this being something extra, you can do it or not, and take advantage of that. And speaking of something extra for this week, so I'm having a look at your your phase 3 campaigns. All right, and I have posted phase 4 for your campaigns. So this is the last phase, and it's due at the end of the month. You will note that if you look on the assignment sheet and actually on the the link that I provide, that I've added the possibility of 25 extra points to this last phase. So normally each of the phases are worth 150. I've placed a value at this one at 175. And I can see that I remember that I don't have a link in the assignment section for you to upload this. I will get that in there soon. Okay, so this week, and it being Holy Week, when someone asked me about a little extra time because it was Holy Week, and I apologize actually to this person because I'd forgotten that they asked me about the little extra time. So I'll tell you what I'll do. Since it is Holy Week, instead of having it due on April the 8th, which is, or excuse me, on April the 7th, I've moved it to April the 8th. So instead of Monday night, which is the 6th, sorry. See, I'm clearly not sufficiently caffeinated. Having it due on Monday, because there's Easter Sunday and you may not be, working on stuff. You're doing stuff for Easter, which is good. This is what we ought to be doing as Christians. I've moved the due date to Wednesday, April 8th. So if you're out and you're doing things for Easter, God's blessings on you. The discussion questions not due until midnight on Wednesday. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing this week. Short read, look at quantitative research. 3 questions drawn from the quantitative research. One of them is a sort of, let's reflect on what we're doing with our study and our group. So it really doesn't even require you to do a lot of running around. Okay, and then one of them is extra. Do that as you like. Okay, let's take a look at what you did last week. Let's look at the questions, see what we come up with for answers and anything that we can add to it. Question number 1, briefly discuss your PR research project by answering the following 2 critical questions. Where do I begin my research and where do I end my research? There's an old adage in business that goes, better is the enemy of done. And what that means is, look, okay, you want to do a thorough job and you want to make sure that you've covered everything that you need to cover, but you don't want to keep going around and around and around and around and saying, oh, how can I improve this? How can I improve this more? How can I improve this more? You got to have a point at which you end it. You got to say, okay, we're chopping it off here. Okay. So let's see what you said. Bob, PR campaign is about Billy Graham's library. So the public relations campaign aims to raise awareness, increase visibility, increase donations and support for the library. During the gathering of data, I used a popular search engine to find relevant publications, thus beginning by conducting general. This led my focus to the most official document available. I'm not quite following the sentence. To the most official document available. Sounds like something the president would say. I'm kidding. Most official ever. So where do you leave off? Also when I believe that I've gathered enough data that effectively informs about the situation of the library, as Stacks outlines answers to when to begin and when to end gathering of data in public relations campaigns research depends on the nature of the PR project and the competence of the firm, and which is also a good question. You know, you can't fly a glider up into subspace orbit. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean that you know, if the shop doesn't have the capacity to do something, don't give it something to do. And this is something likewise you should pay attention to with clients. And I've learned this the hard way. Do not design public relations campaigns that require clients to take steps that they don't have the capacity, whether it's personnel or training of the personnel. And here's even a more cautionary. All right. Don't design public relations campaigns that will bring results to the client that they don't have the capacity to handle. I will give you an example. All right. I have had it that I've done public relation campaigns before, and I have seen things go well and I have seen things not go well. But what I have never seen is an organization that says, "Oh golly gee whiz, this was all our fault that it didn't go well." All right, it's been quite the opposite. They'll look at the campaign, they look at me, they look at the organization that I'm working with, and say, you know, you didn't do this, and this didn't happen, and so on and so forth. And the analogy that I use goes something like this. Let's say that you are asked by a pizzeria that they need to increase the number of pizzas they are going to sell this next quarter because they're just not making it. Okay, you say, okay, yeah, sure. And you go in and you design this great public relations campaign, and twice the number of people show up to the pizzeria than last quarter. All right. However, what you forgot to ask about was the nature, size, and function of the pizza oven at the pizzeria. Because if the pizzeria's pizza oven is a toaster oven, there's no way that the pizzeria is going to be able to handle twice the number of customers as last quarter. And what's going to happen for the pizzeria is now double the amount of people are showing up. All right. Half of those new people are going to get no pizzas. The other half are going to wait, 2-3 hours. And the initial amount that is the normal traffic will have to wait an hour to an hour or two. That first half of the additional people will never come back again. Those who had to wait, the other 3/4, will trash the pizzeria online. And the total effect is likely to be a net negative. You designed a brilliant campaign. All the people showed up. But what you failed to do, and this is not you go, hey, this is my job. I'm just a PR person here. I'm just the strategic communications person here. But what you failed to do was to develop some system, whether you initiated it or you asked them if they had or whoever did it, to check the capacity of the organization to handle the additional influx of customers. And that does not matter if it's pizzeria or public utilities or military base or cosmetics company or retail store, whatever. All right. I'm wagging my fingers. Why? Because I'm speaking from experience. One that I had was just a train wreck. Working with a Danish not-for-profit in Africa. Be sure to check the capacity of the organization and where you start and where you begin by way of your research should be informed by that capacity. Okay, enough for question one. Question number two, briefly discuss how to conduct a case study in PR. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of the study? And this case studies are done all the time, so you should be familiar with them. Cinda, Stacks advises that conducting a case study begins by stating the problem, opportunity, situation the client faces. This is true. This is how you'd conduct any study. Next, the case study will examine the research of published documents, both from the client's internal files, including annual reports, et cetera, et cetera. At this point, the PR campaign goals and objectives are identified. Appropriate communication is determined. The first step of the case study process involves evaluating whether the campaign goals and objectives were met and how its results were met. The advantage of the case study is that they provide a roadmap of what worked and didn't work in a PR campaign and why. Okay, yeah, that's true, and you're getting warmer. What I'm looking for here, though, is why instead of a full-blown campaign, why would you do a case study? And you're really close, and then maybe you are actually saying it, and I'm missing it. Let's look at Annalisa. Doing a case study in PR basically means picking one organization, campaign, or situation and digging into it to understand what happened and why. Okay, and you two, are saying essentially the same thing. This is getting us closer to the justification. You look at all kinds of data such as interviews, media coverage, internal documents, audience feedback, and get a full story. After that, you analyze what you've collected to spot the patterns, lessons, best practices. Stacks points out that case studies are really useful because they let you explore real world examples and context and pull out practical insights. The good thing about case studies is that they let you see the details of complicated situations and understand how different factors interact. You can learn a lot from real examples that you might miss in a survey or experiment. On the flip side, they can take a lot of time. The findings may not apply to every situation. Okay. All right. So yes, for both of you. Here, let me boil this down. Case studies are studies that are shorter. They look at less data, significantly less data than a full-blown study. All right. They may not be studies that are actually turned loose in the field. So let's say Billy Graham Library as an example. All right. And you're like, okay, we need to just pick one of the goals. We need to up the number of people coming through the front door. All right. Now, you could start with a full-blown study about what the people have said at Billy Graham, how many folks they've had there, do they have data on user experience, and how do you analyze that, et cetera, et cetera. And you go, oh, okay. But how about we just study the cases, this is the easy way to remember it, of other organizations who are like this library, and look at 2 or 3 and see what they did that increased their traffic. So a case study looks at less data, maybe even data from outside sources, and gives you a roadmap to how you would do a full-blown study for the organization. And case studies are often presented as part of the pitch, saying, okay, we've heard what you've said, we've analyzed your organization, we see your problem. We've looked at like-to-like organizations, those organizations that are like you. Here's what, by way of sort of best practice or baseline or whatever language you like, is working. Here's what we recommend by road mapping out our action plan. The case study can be very helpful in that process and then making that case. Okay, so good answers, both of you. Number 3, briefly discuss how, according to Stacks, I see a typo in here, you would conduct an in-depth interview. When would an in-depth interview be best for qualitative PR research? Okay, Now, this is one that, the first of these questions may or may not see it on an exam. The second one, probably most certainly you will. Um, something like this, it might be like a multiple choice. Okay. Best way to conduct qualitative, or one of the ways to conduct an interview within qualitative research study would be, dot, dot, dot. Tremaine, let's see what you had to say. According to Stacks, an in-depth interview takes one topic and goes into depth with the topic, but is generally limited to professional experience, knowledge, or brand of the product, and some relatively limited scope that can be examined in great depth in 1 to 3 hours. Additionally, Stacks conveys that in-depth interviews are best used when answering questions and definitions, values, and policies. Okay, yeah, that's that. Make sure that, that's a textbook answer. That's fine for me. Make sure that you could quickly translate that into plain English and in a way that would convey that if you had to explain this to somebody, you could explain it just like boom. Okay. Madeline, Stack discusses in-depth interviews as the best fit public relation research for answering the why and the how of questions regarding a phenomenon. Yes. Okay. Quantitative research is really good at getting to the that something, there is something happening, that it's not like it's a complete wash, but they're not quite as good at getting to the why and how is this happening, because oftentimes when you're doing quantitative research and you smash things into categories and you assume that that this variable, this part of the event influences this variable, that tends to put on some rather, like blinders, that narrows your sight, and you might not see what are referred to as covariance, other things that are, there's this main thing, and then there's this thing over here, and then there's this thing over here that are influencing the outcome, that is, they're influencing the dependent variable. When you sit down and talk to people, they'll tell you, and if you get a couple, half dozen or more interviews, and they keep mentioning this main thing, this main cause of the outcome, but then they mention these other things, you go, oh ho. So this is what is also involved with this outcome, why people come to this library or they don't, why people shop for this thing or they don't. Okay, there is the value to you as a researcher for qualitative data and an in-depth interview. And the best in-depth interviews are conducted in a way that the interviewee, interviewer, okay, is not led around by the interviewer. That is, you avoid asking leading questions that sort of move someone towards a determined outcome. This goes on a good bit in politics, and it's often referred to as a push poll. You'll get these phone calls saying, "Hi, I'm from the blah 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 organization, and we're surveying Americans about what you feel concerning the blah blah blah." And I always hang up. But if you start answering these questions, they're framed in such a way to push you towards voicing support or opposition for a policy or a person, rather than open and allowing you to express what it is that you think and feel. Okay. Those are the better type of questions in qualitative research. The ones that push people towards an answer, stay away from those. All right. And if some organization calls you with what you can clearly sniff out as a push pull, do what I do. Bleep, hang up. Okay, everybody. That is it. My time is up. Have a blessed Holy Week, because today is Holy Thursday and Good Friday, and then on to Easter Sunday. All right. Remember, questions for this week not due until Wednesday, so you have a couple of days on the other side of Easter. Okay. And remember that, especially during Holy Week and the Passion and Resurrection of our Lord, I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. And I will I be in my office on Friday? Yes, I will. But, save that. I will see you on Canvas. Okay. Take care. God bless. Goodbye.